Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Autumn of Healing Summit, where today we will be watching a presentation from Judyann McNamara, the founder of the Montreal Institute of Classical Homeopathy. Welcome to the Autumn of Healing Summit, Judyann.
Thank you so much, Eugenie. It's really an honor and a privilege to be here again with you. And I'm so happy to have been invited to talk about this important topic. It's really a pleasure.
It's lovely to get a chance to speak with you again. We've spoken a couple of times on the Homeopathy Hangout podcast. So when Matthias and Doris asked me to get some speakers for this summit, you were right there on my list. And I'm just so happy that you've said yes. Now, you have done a beautiful presentation for us. So I'm going to be stepping away soon, and then you will be leading the way with your presentation. But you have an epic background and an epic story of how you found homeopathy. So I would love if you can just share that with everyone so they can get a little bit of a background of where you've come from.
Certainly, yeah, my background is science. I've been a physicist since I'm a very young child. Other girls had posters of whatever movie star, Paul Newman or whatever, and I had Einstein. I've always been a scientist, and I was running a research company and doing research. But I was born with a congenital disease that caused me a lot of problems with my lungs and my breathing. And I had my thymus removed when I was just a toddler because of the pectus excavatus. So they had my chest suspended from the ceiling. I was one of the first operations that was successful of pectus excavatus. That's where the breastbone is completely concave. You could put two eggs in my chest. It was like a bowl. And the sternum was melded to the spinal column. So it was a complex surgery. They didn't think I was going to survive, And it was a miracle that I did, but I was really had very complex health issues because I had very few T cells and my lungs hadn't never developed properly because they had been squeezed so much. Anyway, and all of those things. But I'm a stubborn person like me. Just went through everything. But it caught up with me when I turned 30 and I was traveling a lot and I was sick more than I was well. And I started losing a lot of weight. I was getting bronchitis after bronchitis and pneumonia and double pneumonia on a regular basis. And I had taken so much antibiotics my whole life and at very strong doses when I was young that they no longer had any effect on me at all. And basically, the doctor said, there's nothing we can do. And I was very sick. I was coughing up blood and it was pretty bad. And I would try to, I don't know, stimulate my life force. I went to an art class and the art teacher there saw how sick I was. And she handed me a little card and it was a homeopath. I'd never heard of that, didn't know what it was about. I found out later that I was born in the Montreal Homeopathic Hospital.
No way.
I only found that after I discovered homeopathy. I didn't know that beforehand. Anyway, and I went to see this woman, and it was amazing. It was amazing. I'm much healthier now at 70 than I was my whole life.
You're
And
70. You look so
yeah,
good. Wow.
oh, thank you. Thank you. But, really, I didn't, nobody thought that I would live beyond 2 or 4 or 6 or
Wow.
10, and certainly not beyond 30. And so to see how amazing the treatment was and how I was getting stronger and stronger. And after 6 months, I was back at work. I was really recuperated and it continued. Anyway, as a scientist, I just had to know what this was. Because I had taken every, pharmaceutical drug there was by that point, and here was this miraculous thing. And so that's what's turned me on to looking into homeopathy, subtle energies. And I was already interested in the energetic dimension because the work that I was doing at that time was looking at biophoton emission and biophoton communication between cells and the crystalline structure of the viruses, etc. So there was a whole energetic dimension. Biophysics was really the area that fascinated me the most. And the mitochondria and all of that, we were discovering more and more about them at that time. So it was definitely an area of, so I had that area of interest. But then homeopathy, I realized very quickly that this is that. This is an energy medicine. We're on the bioenergetic dimension with this, and this is the medicine of the future.
And that is why I love talking to you. And the people listening to this summit will have to go check out the 2 episodes I did with you on the Homeopathy Hangout podcast, because the way that you're able to explain how homeopathy works on the mitochondria of the cell is just no skeptic can argue with any of that ever. Like, I just feel like we finally have an answer that we can give the skeptics. So I really appreciate you for the work and just what you've done for homeopathy to be able to explain things in this incredible way. I'm so excited for us to dive into your presentation. So let's get straight onto it.
Okay, sounds good. So welcome to my presentation on a research-based psychobioenergetic, holistic, homeopathic approach to pain. I'm Judyann McNamara, the founder of the Montreal Institute of Classical Homeopathy, which I will refer to as Mish, the pet name that we have for our college from this point on. So I want to welcome you. I feel like I'm welcoming you into our classroom. This is the kind of presentation that we make to our students on leading edge topics such as this one, the state of the art understanding of pain. So just to give you an overview of what we're going to be looking at and what you're going to learn is the fine details, a psychobioenergetic holistic perspective again, of exactly how the experience of pain is produced. And then with that understanding, you're going to be able to see how and why certain interventions work and others might only work temporarily. You're also going to gain an understanding of what you can do, you need to do if you suffer from chronic pain and you'd like to cure yourself. So let's look at pain. Pain is something we feel. It's not visible. It's an inner experience of a sensation, an inner experience created entirely in the brain. Even when you've injured yourself, the stimulus coming from the body does not itself create the experience of pain. The experience of pain does not happen in the part of the body. All experience of pain is created in the brain. It's a brain-created experience. The brain then projects the experience of pain onto that part of the body. In the same way that the brain operates to create the sensation of color. So the leaves of a tree are not inherently green. Our brain processes and interprets the electromagnetic signals, the light that's being reflected from the leaves, to create the experience of green in the human being. Now, many people believe that color is a defining and essential property of objects. Like, you ask the people and they'll say leaves are green, like there's green in the leaf. But this belief is mistaken. Color is a sensation, as I said, created by the brain. If the colors we perceived depended only on the wavelength of reflected light, an object's color would vary enormously during the day with the changes and variations of illumination. Instead, the brain keeps the object's colors relatively stable, whether it's in shadow or in light, and even in radical changes of the light that's perceived. So the important point here is that there's no colors out there. The world, the universe, and nature have no inherent color in themselves. Color is the experience, the human experience, that might be unique to the human experience in our brain, in the human brain. So let's look a little, just review, because, you know, we all have conditioned understanding coming back from school and our young years. What were you taught in school about how the brain produces a sensation of pain? And it probably went something like, when pain receptors are stimulated by temperature, pressure, or chemicals, they release neurotransmitters within the cells, and then the signal travels from that part of the body along the nerve cells and is transmitted via the spinal cord to the thalamus, which then transmits other signals to other areas of the brain to be processed and you feel pain in that area. So that's pretty good because that's, almost completely correct. Maybe just a little bit falls short of being complete. Because what it doesn't answer is what is happening when there is no signal being transmitted to the spinal cord or thalamus from the part that feels painful. What we know today is that the brain is capable of creating extreme pain without any input from the body. So the studies using functional MRIs have shown that there's no signal coming from herniated discs, bulging discs, protrusions, and many other back problems, for example. And that, and it goes to, it's easy to prove because the majority of people over 40 or even 30 have lots of deformities in their discs and spines, but not everybody feels pain. So what we know from the failure of correctional surgery as well to address the pain that people feel in their backs is that spinal issues are very rarely the cause of chronic back pain. There's other examples, the pinched nerve, for example, will die and no signal will come from it after that. And yet people will suffer from a pinched nerve, apparently, for a long time. So this phenomenon, the ability of the brain to create even intense pain without any stimulus, is given a name. It's called neuroplastic pain. So what we've learned by studying neuroplastic pain and using functional magnetic resonance is that the experience intensity and duration of pain is not related to the actual stimulus coming from the body. So to understand why that's so, we need to understand the brain a little bit more. And that's what we're going to look at, is exactly how and which parts of the brain create pain. So using, again, functional magnetic resonance, this is all, just in the last few years, on live human subjects in a whole variety of pain experiences, we've been able to map at least 44 parts of the brain that are involved in the creation of the experience of pain. These parts together form what is called the default mode network. Now, it's called the default mode because it's always on. It's where we default to in our thinking and our mental activity whenever we're not completely engaged. It's always running in the background, and it's the default mode. If we have nothing else to do, we will invest in that network and begin the process of thinking in that network. So what it's doing, it's busy creating and maintaining a sense of self. Okay, so, or perhaps more accurately, it's creating the illusion of a self. And the way it does that is by interconnecting sensory information with memory, with emotions, with beliefs, with concepts, with conditioning, future projections, imagination, and bringing all of these together into a me. Okay, so what's important to retain here is that the default mode network creates the illusion of a self. Okay, it makes us feel as if we're living in our head and looking through the eyes. That's the DMN right here. So it's that part of the brain that's creating that experience, that sensation. But we don't really look out at the world through our eyes. There are signals that are reflected and picked up by the mitochondria in the surface of our eyes and then translated into chemical and electromagnetic signals that go to the brain, which is then processed. But the images that we quote unquote see exist only in our brain. So the brain projects these images onto the world, creating a 3D effect, a little bit like the new video glasses that they have, the 3D effect. So the DMN correlates past experiences, concepts, and information and filters into what goes into the final image of what we see. So you know when the DMN is operating because it reacts and comments on what you're experiencing. So much so that, you know, when you're in the awe of seeing something and then you're saying, oh, I've got to take a picture right now, or oh, this, or oh, it reminds me of, and you've lost the awe. That's the DMN. That's the DMN coming in and filtering and processing and making you think about what you're seeing, sort of interfering in the direct experience, if you like. So the DMN, the important thing to see is that the DMN is what creates the me that I think I am. So my personality, which is what my brain chooses to remember at any given point, how I remember and what I remember from my past, my story. It's really an ever-changing concept that's created by the default mode network, and a concept that exists only in my brain, even though I'd like to convince everybody else of all sorts of things. That's what it is. Okay, so and like I say, it does so. Our social conditioning also has made this illusion of a me living inside my head to become hardwired into our genetics. So the default mode network is responsible for creating neural pathways between the concept of self and the fight and freeze, somatic, parasympathetic and sympathetic stress modes, the vagus response. All of that is interconnected with the default mode network. Okay, so the default mode network also triggers and stimulates all of our survival mechanisms. And it is that part of the brain that creates the neurocircuits that cause pain, even when there is no injury or lesion. So these neurocircuits can be triggered by any one of the many parts of the default mode network. So it could be triggered by a past event, by a memory, by a smell, by a date. These neurocircuits are real and they cause real pain. So when we say it's in your head, it's not because it's being imagined. You are experiencing real pain, but it is not due to a signal coming from your body. So that's the neuroplastic pain that is created by the DMN. So the default mode network, so let's look at, since it's so important about creating most of the pain that we feel, let's understand it a little bit more. So it creates a sense of me, mine, and ideas about myself, my autobiography, the story of a self, from very selected memories, by the way, and experiences. It pulls out the memories that are convenient for whatever concept of self that we're trying to put across in any moment. If it's the poor me or the victorious me or whatever, that's going to pull out different information. And it also creates the sense that you have a body. So it interconnects a lot of the spatial sensory information that we get with your different body parts. So, it brings together, for example, scene recognition, stimulation of the parahippocampus, and different parts of the cortex, and integrates this with information to create an autobiographical memory. Also to create future simulations, imagined futures. By connecting all of this to the auditory, visual, and sensory information gathered by still other parts of the brain, It determines what you unconsciously pay more attention to, what you unconsciously ignore, what you just don't see or don't notice. It creates and includes what and how you think about others, your beliefs about others, and even determines how you infer what the motives or purpose of others' actions are. That's total interpretation. We don't know what someone's motive is, if there is any motive at all. But is our interpretation, and it's the default mode network that is putting together past experiences and all sorts of other things to create that interpretation. It also connects our perception, attention, spatial cognition, action, to help with the creation and recall of what we call episodic memories. So it has all of the emotional information and emotional information that's connected as well with internally valued rewards. And that's how it makes decisions about yourself, about your goals, about events, about decisions making, with regards to your family, for example. It's really important that you see how much of what you take for granted as yours is really pieced together. It's multiple disparate pieces and parts of information, memory, emotions, and bits that make it seem, and the DMN makes it seem as if the me is one whole and real. Okay, just like the image that we have in our brain of the world feels real. But it does so, and when it does so, it takes up a lot of energy. So the default mode network, as it's determining all of this, as it's processing all of this, okay, whenever you think of yourself in any way, like what your opinion is, what your belief is, or what you start thinking about what others might be thinking about you, the DMN uses 80% of your total brain energy consumption to do so. Now, the brain itself is the biggest usurper of energy. So, more than the heart. So to say that the default mode network uses an enormous amount of energy is definitely only a reflection of a part of the truth. The brain uses, I think it is 10 times the ratio of the other organs. So that's how much your DMN is using. Okay. So again, why it's called the default mode network is because it's always on alert. It's always looking for what could threaten me, my image, my sense of self, whatever I believe about myself, or whatever I want others to believe about me. So it's always looking for a threat on any of those things, just the ideas I have. Whenever we worry, or we do too much thinking about the future, or regrets about the past, or about what we should or shouldn't have done, this is all the DMN on high alert. It links anticipation and imagination of the forebrain to fear and stress mechanisms in the amygdala or limbic brain, or fight and flight response. Okay, so it creates loops. So we imagine something happening. That imagined event creates fear via the DMN. The DMN then connects that to the creation of the emotion of fear. And then because we're feeling afraid, we think more about the future to try to imagine, what we could do to change that, right? And then this loop, and we can get caught in a loop where every time we're imagining something, we're creating more fear, and that fear is then causing us to imagine more. And I'm talking about that loop in particular because it plays a big role in creating pain. It's directly related to the creation of pain. So, even if nothing is happening right now, the DMN will imagine future events to create worry, or dig up past ones to ruminate about, or create guilt or regret about, or pain. So pain symptoms have been shown to be associated with the default mode network. And the more connectivity there is in our frontal brain in anticipation, imagine outcomes, and worry, the greater and more frequent the pain is experienced. Okay, so we've been able to measure that. So the more you worry or think about anything to do with you, your safety, your threat, your idea of yourself is going to increase your pain. All right, but definitely the degree of fear, worry, or anxiety, associated with the pain is going to be even greater. But of any event is going to determine how much pain is actually experienced. Okay, so, I'm harping a little bit more on the DMN, the narrative brain, because it's so important to understand that it is a storyteller. So anytime you start telling a story, you start talking about something, that's your DMN, that's your narrative brain that's taken over, and it's now starting to piece things together and take a point of view and connecting actual events with imaginary ones, future possibilities with past remembrances. It's the part of the brain that's responsible for your mental chatter. When you're talking to yourself, everybody talks to themselves. Every human being talks to themselves because every human being has a default mode network, and the default mode network creates different voices in our heads as well. Creates the voice of the judge, for example. So we go, oh, look what I did, or I shouldn't have done that. That's a voice created by your default mode network. It's trying to keep you safe, but it's also creating a story in your head that can create pain as well. Okay, so because it connects specific types of attitudes, feelings, emotions with specific body parts, and that's the other part of the DMN, where pain occurs, okay, when it determines where pain occurs, when it occurs, and why it occurs. And it might be a body part that has no damage and may never have had a physical injury. So there might not even be a physical component, or only a very small physical component, but the experience of pain is real. So the other component that heightens in pain is the emotional aspect. So we know that morphine, for example, a very strong painkiller, quote unquote, the action of morphine, we know chemically, only acts on one part of the brain. It acts on the emotional part of the brain. And by cutting off or reducing the activity of the emotional part of the brain, that's how much pain is reduced, or the experience of pain is reduced. Okay, so emotions are the biggest contributing factor. And just think of the word emotion. It's energy in motion. This is your vital energy that's moving. But it should be moving. That's why it's called emotion. Any emotion has a normal lifespan of 90 seconds. In other words, it should take 90 seconds for you to feel angry or feel sad or feel disappointed, and 90 seconds later, it should be gone. That's emotion. And if you doubt that, just watch a baby or a child, and you'll see how quickly they switch emotions. And it can be as short as 90 seconds. But when the DMN, the default mode network, which begins to form in childhood and gradually builds up and extends its neuronal network in adolescence and adulthood, okay, when it gets involved, it attaches stories, right? It attaches past events and future, and there's all sorts of other neuronal connections that it's made with all different parts of your brain. And then the story is going to amplify the emotion and sustain it for much longer. Okay. So whenever we say things like, there must be something wrong with me, it'll never go away, I hate this, why can't it stop? Why does this happen to me? Why is life so cruel to me? Why am I being punished? That is the story that is being associated with the pain. So the pain is an experience, but now we're going to attribute, the me in there with all sorts of other aspects of life that the DMN is going to make a story from. So if we don't see that we're caught in a story, the emotion will go on until we let go of the story. And not only does this usurp in energy. I'm just going to go back to that slide for a second there. Not only does it usurp our energy, but it causes pain to occur and amplifies the pain. So the DMN amplifies emotions, but it also suppresses emotions. So if instead of seeing that our DMN has created a story around our emotion, we judge ourselves for having an emotion. Okay, so let's say we don't go into story, but we judge ourselves, which is a type of story anyway, because we want to be spiritual or good, and good people don't get angry, or spiritual people don't get angry, or people who want to be liked, don't express their disappointment. Or so the DMN, the judge, one of the voices of the DMN, is going to suppress the emotion. So we're not going to express it. We're going to suppress it, but it's going to keep the story alive and the emotion alive. And so that energy is still being wasted in the background. So the default mode network is our master puppeteer of all our subpersonalities, including the voice of the judge. And that's one of the reasons why it uses so much energy. Okay, so we have a pain amplifier in another form now, because we have statistically shown that suppressed emotion is one of the most important contributors to chronic pain. People who consider themselves spiritual, religious, perfectionistic, or whatever, likable, etc., are statistically more likely to experience chronic pain. And that is why. It's because it usually involves, in order to keep that image, it usually involves repressing or suppressing some emotions. And again, emotion only has to last 90 seconds. So it's a whole other story. Okay. I'm sure you're asking the question, well, how do I get out of the DMN story? And it's not an easy task. It does require that the pain sufferer be proactive with individualized ways and means of waking up from the story. It requires embracing our shadow and our dark side. And I emphasize the word individualized because every individual is different. So each tool, it's your toolkit is going to be very different from someone else's, and what you practice is going to be very different. But you do have to discover how you can go from your narrative brain, the storyteller, okay, to an experiential state, to being able to be in moments of awe and experience the sensation, the awesome sensations of being alive right now in here. So there, like I say, this is it needs to be individualized. If you go to self-help books and you just try to implement some of their very good ideas, they might not work for you. So if you've had that experience, it's because it takes a lot of practice and knowledge to know what kind of tool is going to work with which kind of person. And it helps to have someone with that experience guide you to what would work best for you from the exploration that you do together. And, this is one of the key reasons why we include lifestyle coaching and holistic practice and natural therapy in our homeopathy training. Our homeopaths are also holistic therapists. They know how to coach people. They know how to help them find tools so that they can, get free up the healing energy that is caught up in all sorts of different ways. And it's especially difficult in our times to get out of the story because of the immense focus on self-image and social media and advertising. They going on social media causes our stress hormones to skyrocket because we're focusing on the me, and the DMN, right? Takes over then. And now it's going to be making all sorts of connections and using up a lot of vital energy. So every time you're reminded of your experience, of your appearance, let's say, or your opinions, or your beliefs, or your DMN is going to get fired up for action. And a story is starting in your head because you start thinking about it, right? And that's what then creates anxiety and creates pain. The experiential self, however, okay, arises directly from our fundamental sense of being. So when we're in pure experiences, in those moments of awe, when we get a break from our DMN, at least for a couple of microseconds, maybe. And that's, when we can disidentify from our thoughts and from your thinking and the false DMN created self, all the ideas and concepts that you have of yourself. That's when also helps us experience fully without mental interpretation, without mental chatter, so that we can have moments of awe. And in those moments, of course, our feeling of separation disappears, of having a separate self disappears. It's just the experiencing that's there. But it does require disidentifying. And that's another really important part of our case-taking process at Niche, is the disidentification. Okay, so what can you do about the DMN's role in pain? So exploring this sensation way back in the 1990s, I worked with a group at McGill on chronic pain and how to reduce chronic pain. And the research that they did and published in 2005 and even before that showed that the most effective intervention is to get out of the narrative, out of the story, and into just the pure experience of the pain, even. So don't talk about what happened, how you feel about it, just the sensation. So the intervention is about emphasizing just the sensation, because the resolution of pain lies in the experience. It doesn't lie in the narrative. You're not going to resolve your pain by talking about it and talking about how you feel about it and all of that. That doesn't help. If anything, it's going to make it worse. So pain management always emphasizes the helpfulness of staying in the sensation as a pure sensation without any narrative. So we don't label it pain. We see whether it's stinging or burning, whether it's moving, whether it changes, how it's changing, whether it's changing in intensity, whether it's going into a different kind of pain. And we keep on that going and going deeper into it. In other words, we're forcing the brain to describe it in more and more detail. And that's the central pillar of our case taking at Niche, okay, is to get people out of the narrative and to keep them in just this describing the sensation. So why our clients find that alone to be so effective and to release and be therapeutic, just the exercise of exploring the sensation, is because it shifts the energy and attention away from the default network and the story and into other parts of the brain. So what you're doing is you're getting the brain to check its source. You're saying, okay, you're telling me I have pain in my ankle. All right. So what kind of pain is it? And I want you to be precise. Is it shooting? Is it, how often is it shooting? What kind of shooting pain is it? Okay. And let's stay with it. Is it changing over time? Is it staying the same? Is it increasing or decreasing? So you're forcing your brain to check its sources. We're telling the brain to describe the signal coming from that part of the body. And it's going to be forced to ask, is there really a signal coming from that part of the body? I better check it out. So, as I said, in our case-taking process, this is a central pillar of what we do in every case, whether the person has chronic pain or not. It helps in every situation for the person to get out of the story, out of the narrative, and just into the sensation, just into the pure experience. Okay, the other thing that is really helpful to diminish the DMN's role in creation of pain is anything that gets you out of your narrative, anything that gets you out of your inner chatter, and focus your brain on the here and now, on the physical experience. Okay, all of that diminishes the power and influence of the DMN, and thus your pain. And I have a series of meditations that are designed to help you quieten your inner chatter, to help you release your emotions, to help address all of these parts that we're talking about of the DMN that are going to help enormously in the reduction of pain. And that is in the form, as I said, of a series of short meditations, a series of 28 exercises that you can do on your own every day that only take a few seconds, but can change your perspective and get you out of your story and back into the moment. I also have them in the form of a podcast. Susanna DaCosta, one of our teachers, has assisted me in creating a podcast that really explains what each one of the exercises does. So I will put the links in a document that you can download, and hopefully you can join us on our newsletter and on our blog to get all the kinds of free e-training that we offer the public. So that's the key. Use pain as your doorway. Use it as your doorway to let go of the false self created by your default mode network. And use it as the doorway to embrace your true self. And that's what this series is called, by the way, is Doorways. Doorways to the self that is timeless, whole, interconnected with all of life and all of existence, and that trusts your life, that trusts life and your body. And this is another point that's really important, is that when you attend and you appraise pain sensations, it has to be done through a lens of safety. In other words, you need to make sure that you're calming your fears, that you're doing it with curiosity, not with fear, not with trying to control, not with an attachment to an outcome. Okay, because that's all stories. You need to calm your fears, calm your fearful stories around your pain, and just look at the pain with fresh eyes, with curiosity. That's key to that kind of exercise. So here are the two sayings that you must remember. Worry, fretting, anxiety about your pain fuels it. When you worry about a pain, that fear fuels it. And associating thoughts or memories with the pain causes feedback loops and neuronal pathways to form. Usually this happens unconsciously, but it's good to remember what's going on during and after an injury to see what emotions, circumstances, people, time of day has become part of a feedback loop that's going to recreate the pain anytime you feel that emotion, find yourself in similar circumstances, or even the season, month, day, or time that occurs. Okay, so fear fuels pain, and neurons that fire together wire together. And that's the basis of chronic pain, of neuroplastic chronic pain, of actually all chronic pain. In the references document available for download, I recommend a book called The Way Out. And he talks about pain reprocessing, and he does so with humor. And the name is Alan Gordon. Anyway, it's in the reference document, so you can refer to it there. At MISH, we facilitate each step of this reprocessing and reversal process, okay, in our homeopathic sessions and with the help of homeopathic remedies. Okay, so educate yourself about neuroplastic pain and the reversibility of pain, and that's what you're doing right now. Gather and reinforce your personalized evidence for neuroplastic pain component and the reversibility of pain. I'm going to look at that in the next slide. Get out of your narratives by attending to and appraising pain sensations through a lens of safety and the other doorways that we can provide you. Address your emotional threats and prolonged and amplified emotional states through self-acceptance and through the help of homeopathic remedies. Again, these are stories and neuronal pathways that can be addressed with homeopathy. And I'm going to explain how in a few minutes. And ultimately reduce the power of the default mode network over your life and expand into your true self, your true expression, and a new way of living. So let's look at that number 2 that I was saying. There's a questionnaire that evaluates the degree of neuroplastic pain. Okay, so I've chosen each of the following as the key indicators of neuroplastic pain being a pretty important component in whatever pain you're feeling. Okay, so the questions that determine that, interestingly, are the same questions that we use in our homeopathic case taking. So the etiology, for example, that's a classical homeopathy question, but our understanding of etiology is a much broader one. Now, our students learn it, to ask about everything happening to that individual in the time frame preceding, during, and following the appearance of pain, whether or not there was any accident or injury, is what else was going on in your life. And maybe you don't think it was a stressful thing. Maybe it was even happy stress. Maybe it was the birth of a new baby. Maybe it was a move that you really wanted to do, or a change in your job, or something that you didn't even think was important. But in exploring it together, we will see what it represents. And that makes all the difference as far as understanding why the DMN chose and created pain around that event. So, it can also be dietary changes, antibiotics, anything that might upset the microbiome, because the microbiome can contribute a lot to emotional dysregulation and pain, and in those cases, we can supplement a core remedy with bowel nosodes as an example. But depending on the answers, we can evaluate how much the stress factor is involved and how much it contributed to the creation of the sensation of pain. Okay. So, so that's the experience of pain as well. Structurally caused pain does not have a variation of symptoms, nor does it spread or move from one part of the body. And usually it's not worse with specific triggers, and some people will say a stressful situation, a certain kind of stressful situation, it only happens at work, for example, or it only happens at home, or it only happens on vacation for some people, after I've made a mistake, after I've made an argument. So we help you really understand exactly when it happened and what triggers it, and whether or not the pain fluctuates. So all of these are indications of neuroplastic pain, a pain that is being created by your brain because it's made a connection with a sound, with a smell, with a time of day, Okay, so all of these triggers are really important to uncover and understand so that you can be supplied with the right tools to be able to really address chronic pain. Also, symmetrical pain. Whoops, went back there. Symmetrical pain is a very rare occurrence, unless you fell on both ankles at the same time. But usually it's just on one side of the body. So if it's on both sides of the body, that might also be an indication. Now, what I find really interesting about all of these questions, which are on a neuroplastic pain questionnaire, is that they're all questions that Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathy, brought into the consideration when you consider a remedy. These, and that's because homeopathy has always understood the body-mind connection. Going back 200 years back to Hahnemann, who always included mental and emotional states and physical generals. The generals are all produced by the brain in considering his prescription. Okay, so homeopathy is just a natural medicine and the natural solution, and the way we find the natural solution to chronic pain. So we're missing an important dimension, and that is the quantum biology, because I want to ask a question. All of these things we know bring relief, mindfulness can, and exploring the sensation can, but so can warm baths and warm compresses, or infrared LEDs sometimes, and magnets, or massage, or going to the chiropractor, or having some other kind of treatment. We know that this can very often produce effects and may not eliminate the pain. It might come back, but it certainly can reduce it or make it go away for a good amount of time, even if we're not doing the psychological intervention. So how does that work if it's neuroplastic pain? Okay, so as important as a component psychology is, we do need to understand the deeper underlying biological dimension as to why some external treatments relieve pain and others don't, and to the extent that they're helpful. Because the experience of pain is an energetic phenomenon, and healing requires as much available energy as possible. Life is energy. No energy, no life. Life is energy flow. And the flow of energy is the distinguishing factor between life and death. Energy flows not only for growth, it's important for growth, for differentiation, for complex behavior. It determines our ability to adapt, to evolve, to maintain health, and to heal. So without energy, we're just a vat of chemicals. All right, so where does all this energy come from? All of life relies on the plant chloroplasts transforming the energy coming from the sun, coming from sunlight, into food. That's where all energy, life energy, comes from, is chloroplasts in plants. I made them green here because they appear green to humans. And the light is transformed into matter, which we call food. And when we eat that food, the mitochondria, I like to call them the cousins of the chloroplasts, retransform the food back into energy. And this is all a quantum physics process, a quantum biology process, the transforming the food back into energy that the body can use, and the creation of food happen on the quantum level. Now we're looking at energy, E being transformed, E and light, C squared is the speed of light squared. We're looking at energy in the form of light being transformed into matter. Okay. And so chloroplasts are what make the food, but what makes the energy or releases that energy and directs that energy in our body are the mitochondria. So the mitochondria live in every single one of your cells. And this very important process that they do is the most important, is what keeps us alive. But they do many others. They also produce hormones, cytokines. They're involved in the stress response. They even turn on and turn off oncogenes. Mitochondria are not the little beans. You might have learned in high school that they're these little, drawn these little beans around the nucleus floating in the cytoplasm. They're not that. They are actually, when they're dead, they're like that. When they're dead, they look like little beans. But when they're alive, they are like nerves. They're synapsing. They're interconnecting and reconnecting with each other all the time. What they're doing is they're actually processing information coming from everywhere, and inside the cell and outside the cell. And they inform and coordinate all of our physiological functions. So they form synapses, and I was going to say just like the brain does, but the truth is that the brain is modeled on the mitochondria, not the other way around. The brain, our brain evolved from the way the mitochondria work and from the mitochondria. So that's gives you an idea then that the mitochondria are the brain that surrounds each cell nucleus. Okay, they mediate all epigenetic changes. We've been able to see that the mitochondria are the ones to turn on diabetes, for example, the genes related to diabetes or any chronic disease. So we all have genes for almost all the diseases, but it's how do they get turned on, and when they get turned on is determined by the mitochondria. And as I said, they also produce hormones. They're involved in cytokine production, cortisol production, all inflammatory processes. They determine what is stressing the organism and when the fight or flight mode gets turned on. Don't forget, we talked about the default mode network, but now we're going a dimension deeper. We're going inside the nerves of the default mode network. Inside the nerves of the default mode network are the mitochondria that are making those decisions. Okay. So the mitochondria are living, dynamic, energy transforming, signaling, quantum processing organelles. How's that for a mouthful? They are the ones that transduce biological information. They sense and respond to both internal and environmental inputs. They integrate information through dynamic, network-based physical interactions and produce output signals that regulate the functions of other organelles as well as all our physiological functions. They're very important. Mitochondria form an intercommunicating intelligent network throughout the body. So not only do they have a network around the nucleus of every cell, in every cell, including all of our nerve cells, all of our cells everywhere, they also form an interconnecting intelligent network throughout the whole body. Okay, it's called the Mitochondrial Information Processing System, MIPS. And I have references for that in my reference document. It is that configures and maintains the vital field. So what is really interesting to us as homeopaths is that mitochondria can be tuned with homeopathy, because homeopathy is on the same immaterial energetic dimension as the mitochondria. The homeopathic remedy is an energy signal, and that energy signal gets picked up by the mitochondria. So what we're understanding more and more with recent research, and I'm talking about very recent research in the last couple of years, is that circulating cell-free mitochondrial DNA, what's called CF-empty DNA, so is currently being used as a biomarker of psychobiological and cellular stress, of anxiety states, affect, aging, cardiovascular disorders, and all sorts of disease states. Notice that it's a biomarker of both biological and psychological states. So when what the mitochondria do, one of the things that the mitochondria do is that they emit some of their DNA into the bloodstream. That's a very strong signal that has all sorts of effects throughout the network and throughout the body, and makes major changes in what's happening in the body. And it does so based on both mental and physical input. Okay. So that's why we now know that the mitochondria are the confluence point of the body and mind. It's where body and mind come together. Yeah. So the division between body and mind is blurring. Okay, so I want to go back to a point that we made before about the energetic basis of life, right? And that all life is energy, and how the chloroplast turns sunlight for energy into matter. And we say that, but this isn't a chemical reaction that we can just write a formula for, even though we do, and we put little arrows to show energy coming in and going out and matter, whatever. It is a quantum process. Just think of how magical that is, to take light and to make it into stuff. They create matter, atoms and molecules from light. That is the source of our food. We are light beings in the true sense of the word. So the mitochondria are the bioquantum organelles, right, that transform that food, those cousins of the chloroplasts. They have the same ancestry as the chloroplasts. And those two organelles are alone, just those two organelles alone are responsible for all of life on the planet, all of evolution on the planet, because the mitochondria, it's because of the mitochondria that evolution occurred, and how it occurred, you can understand through the mitochondria. All of the food you consume made from light goes to your mitochondria. Every single morsel, every single molecule goes through your mitochondria so that they can transform it into energy. That's called the Krebs cycle. Okay. But in order to do so, they need one important element. And this is where it all comes together. The only reason you breathe is to bring oxygen to your mitochondria. You bring oxygen to your mitochondria so that they can transform your food into life energy for all of your organs, your whole body. The reason you breathe, the main reason your blood flows to all parts of your body, is to feed the mitochondria. No mitochondria, no energy, no life. Life is energy. Your body, without energy, without the mitochondria, is just a vat of lifeless chemicals. So what do you think happens if there is a reduction of oxygen in the mitochondria? It's a good question, isn't it? The mitochondria need oxygen in order to create all of the energy that all of your body needs. So what do you think they do if the flow of oxygen is reduced? And if you answered all hell breaks loose, you are absolutely right. The definition of pain by the International Association for the Study of Pain is as follows. Pain is an unpleasant brain-produced sensory and emotional experience. Brain-produced sensory and emotional experience associated with tension and restriction of blood flow. So that is the official definition. And there is a whole process that happens in that. So let's look at that process. We talked about something perceived as a threat to the default mode network, some aspect of the me. Ooh. Okay. So the things that put the DMN on alert: worry, self-criticism, sensitivity to criticism, putting pressure on yourself, perfectionism, all these things on this list. Any of those things and more. So those are the things that put the DMN on high alert. When the DMN goes into high alert, the autonomic nervous system, the mitos there, send signals to the body part that represents what it needs defending, what it interprets as needing defending. We're going to look at the symbol of that in a minute. But what happens is that there is a constriction of blood flow. Okay. On that part that it feels needs defending, there's a constriction of the blood flow. Less blood means less oxygen. And this slight deprivation of oxygen causes resistance in the electron flow in the mitochondria. And that's the bad news. That's when the mitos send out pro-inflammatory cytokines and a stress response is put into action. The mitochondria create inflammation in order to increase the blood flow to that area because they need that oxygen. So they're going to send out their inflammatory cytokines. They're going to make that area hot and inflamed and bring blood to it so that it can restore oxygen delivery, relieve the resistance, and improve a more efficient flow of oxygen in themselves. Now, what happens then is the neuroreceptors pick up on the inflammation, and now they send pain signals to the brain. So there initially wasn't pain signals. There was just tension. Just, oh, I just got jabbed. Oh, someone just insulted me. Oh, tension. Tension causes restriction of the blood. Restriction of the blood causes restriction of oxygen. The mitochondria go, need more blood, need more blood. And that's what causes inflammation. But then the neuroreceptors in that area send a signal up to the brain and say, oh, there's stuffing going over here. We don't know what it is, but there's something happening. There's inflammation. Maybe there is, cells like broken. We don't know, but warning, warning. So now the brain says, oh my, there's a signal coming from the brain. Doesn't know what's going on. The brain never knows what's going on in that part of the body. It doesn't, it gets a signal. So if you now feel anxious or worried about that pain, you start feeling it, right? This causes a feedback loop to be formed in the brain and the body. And this additional stress causes the mitochondria to release mitochondrial DNA into the bloodstream. And this can turn on all sorts of things, including an overactive immune response, for example. And that's how it creates chronic pain, allergies, and many other diseases, right? Diseases that are initially caused just by a stressor, just by a sense of self, just by someone saying something to me that I didn't like. So once these feedback loops are in place, they can easily get triggered. Connections now have been made between a perceived stressor and an inflammatory and pain-producing process. So even if you calm down after it happens, the loop has been created and it's easily re-triggered at another event. And you might have even forgotten about that happening. But then all of a sudden something happens, or you go somewhere and your pain comes back. Okay. Now, if this continues, and if you continue to be worried that there's something wrong with that part and you get anxious, and even though there's no diagnosis, you get it checked out, but they can't find anything, but there must be something, I feel pain there. Eventually, there will be actual tissue and organ damage due to repeated inflammatory response, because now you're getting anxious about it. And if you still haven't resolved that issue that triggered you in the first place, you're going to create, it can create some kind of disease or lesion in that part of the body, or allergies, or autoimmune, all sorts of other kinds of diseases, and chronic pain, fibromyalgia, all of that. Okay, so this is the whole quantum biology understanding of how chronic pain is created. And as you can see, there are many components. That's why it's psychobio, quantum, and all of that we really need to understand in order to really see the whole picture. So in summary, when the brain perceives any kind of threat, a strong emotion, fear, or worry, it is going to lead to the mitochondria of the DMN sending messages to the mitochondria of the autonomic nervous system to constrict the blood vessels in that specific area of your body that represent the threat. And the restriction of oxygen makes the mitos start an inflammatory pain cycle and the potential of chronic pain. That's the short summary of it. Okay, so let's go back to the question that I asked you. This is how all this started, right? Is what about the pain or relief of pain, even if temporarily, with warm baths, warm compresses, ointments, massage, going to the chiropractor, and other treatments? What do all of these have in common? Well, I'd like to put a little timer here. Tick, 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 tick. Just let you think about that for a moment. Okay. What all of these have in common is that they all increase blood flow. Increasing blood flow to the area and thus increase oxygen, which makes the mitos happy. They go, oh, phew, okay, we've got enough oxygen to properly do our job. So we don't have to send any more inflammatory cytokines right now, at least for now. No? But if you still harbor something about the me, the DMN will soon trigger the autonomic nervous system to cause tension in that specific area of the body that represents the threatened part of the me you think you are, and cause the pain to return. Which body part? I'm sure you're asking, saying, why does she keep saying a specific body part? So I'd like you to think for a moment. What if your inner wisdom, because our bodies are so wise, they're interconnected, our heart is interconnected with all of the energy of life. We are a dancing waveform of energy, interconnected with all of the other dancing waveforms of energy. That's what we really are. We just appear because our brain makes an image of us being separate and contained in a body that we think that that's what we are. But that isn't what we are. We're much, much more than that. But regardless of what we think, our body has so much wisdom because it is interconnected. The wisdom, the elephants during the tsunami all broke their chains and ran into the jungle and into the mountains because they knew the tsunami was coming, but the humans didn't. Their interconnection. They're still interconnected. They don't have their DMN making the sense of a separate self yet, as much as we do. Not to say that they don't have selves, they do, but they don't have as active a DMN that makes stories about the self. Okay, because we're so good at making our stories. All right. So what if your inner wisdom is trying to tell you something or get your attention? The brain can't speak. We get thoughts in our brain, but thinking isn't speaking. Our body can't talk to us directly. But if there's something that is being sensed in the field, right? The only way that our body can usually get our attention, because we're so busy thinking about ourselves, is that to send a signal of pain, right? So it's just to get our attention. That's all pain is. It's just a signal. It doesn't mean something is wrong. It doesn't mean that there's a lesion necessarily, as we said, okay? It just trying to get our attention. It's getting our attention to a body part. And what we know is that each body part is symbolic of an aspect of self. These correlations have been made through Chinese medicine and through homeopathy as well, and other traditional medicines. Before we separated the mind from the body in our modern era, we're so smart, we used to see that as one whole. And Hahnemann saw it as one whole. So we have many maps, and we use these maps as guidelines and hints. Okay, so it's not this means that. No, there's no two individuals are the same, and we have to see what that part represents to that individual. It might represent, something very different. Or my upper arm might represent something very different to someone else. My upper arm might represent, getting a lot of injections when I was a child that were very painful, and had second, to someone else, their upper arm means their strength. We're not trying to generalize here or say that there's a definite, this means that. But these are doorways again. We're opening the doorway to what the body might be trying to tell us from that part. And some of these correlations are helpful in the inquiry, because we want to help the individual find out what their pain might represent for them. And only the individual can tell us what is true for him or her, and only if we're doing it with open inquiry. So the constrictions that happen are related to something representative. And it could be related to an old injury as well, because the old injury represents something. What does that injury represent? Why, where did you feel that you needed to protect that part, or the symbol of that part, what that part symbolizes at a time of your life? What emotion is related to it, state or event, that is going to be symbolic just to you. So just to give you a very quick overview, at Miche, we flesh out all of the important aspects of the narrative with our clients. And the homeopathic remedy that we administer is chosen specifically to reduce the susceptibilities to the trigger that caused the DMN to go on high alert for that individual. Our students learn and practice an inquiry-based dialogue to help their clients understand all of the components and contributing factors involved in their particular case and experience. Each one of these dimensions is involved in the creation of pain and disease. The sensations in this chart are not the sensations, the physical sensations of pain, by the way, in the purple at the bottom. These are this dynamic, what we call the dynamic or energetic sensations that are felt by the whole body-mind when the sense of self feels threatened. So when I get insulted, what does that feel like? Oh, it feels like a slap. It feels like a break. It feels like a hit. It feels like a stab. Huh? Okay, that's obviously not a physical sensation. It's a sensation that I feel dynamically, that I feel energetically from a stimulus, from a situation or an event without a physical component. So that's that level of sensation that we want to go to. So we explore the sensation on the physical level as a sensation of pain, but we also explore a very different sensation that tells us more about the dynamic process that's at the basis of the cycle of pain, that's really underneath the sensations of pain that we feel in the physical body. So the new me dynamic, the know you, know me, the dynamic, the place where we reunite with the whole, is the process where the susceptibility to threats to the me is reduced and eliminated, hopefully even, so that we recognize that it's just a story in our head. So every individual is unique, and thus to work this way, we need to use, as Hahnemann hoped, all of nature's frequencies to address the uniqueness of every individual. And Mish sees that every master homeopath's contribution is complementary. Hahnemann runs all through this, all the masters run all through our chart here. But I was showing how each master contributes a different aspect, has a different perspective, which makes sense because they all have their own unique perspective. So what they bring to homeopathy is going to have that perspective. And so to truly practice, to truly understand the remedy, we need to see it from all those perspectives and understand it from all those perspectives. And in order to do so, we need to go to the very essence of the remedy. We need to understand the soul of the remedy. And that's the kind of materia medica that we teach. So we use all of these complementary lights to understand the diamond and all of the different aspects of the diamond that every remedy is. And like I say, every individual is unique, and we need to use all of nature's frequencies, just as Hahnemann said in the Organon and in aphorism 50 or 51, all of nature's frequencies to address the uniqueness of every individual. So our Mish map extends through all the kingdoms and covers more than 5,000 remedies. Our method enables students to know how to find the simillimum from all available remedies once they've understood fully the individual's energy dynamic. So homeopathic remedies are signals on the same subtle quantum biology dimension. Okay. As the mitochondria, they're at the which are at the confluence point of the body and mind. It's as at Mish, we've developed a quantum understanding of the vital field based on the continuing developing understanding of the mitochondria that serves to find the simillimum that will act on the mitochondria, the organelles that configure and maintain the vital field. Okay. So that's what the homeopathic remedy does, is that the well-chosen simillimum is going to talk directly to the mitochondria that are involved in the creating of the pain dynamic that the person is feeling. And of course, the homeopathic remedy is supported with coaching, dietetics, natural supplementation, therapeutic supports, herbs, botch flower essences, bowel nosodes, zarcodes. All of these play an important role, and the different tools for different types of pain. And of course, every situation is different. And you'll see this chart. I won't go through it all now, but each type of pain is going to require a different kind of approach. Acute pain, you just need a remedy related to the type of injury, and maybe, bring some external applications to reduce inflammation there. But when pain becomes subacute, then maybe we have to pay attention to that body part, look at remedies, not only related to the type of injury, but also the stages of the healing process, if it's a longer healing process, and bring in things like cell salts and supplements and whatever to bring that together. If it's pain related to cancer or organ related pain, then we have other things to look at, maybe look at the drugs that are involved, the disease that's involved, what kind of ways that we can reduce the pain. peripheral neuropathy, you know, often involves muscle spasms and numbness, you know, very different components as well. And, you know, one of the things that really helps is anything that's going to bring more oxygen. So this is where breathing techniques can be important. Breathing techniques are important as well in emotionally related pain and all of the emotion related to pain. Breathing techniques, why? Because they bring more oxygen to the mitochondria that are starting this whole process because of the tension and because of the lack of oxygen coming to them, right? That they can't do their job. They can't create energy for us. So chronic pain, this is where we usually need a very big tool bag, toolbox. We need, you know, to look at it from many different angles. We need to properly assess it, know how much is neuroplastic, be able to find the source of that neuroplastic pain. So yes, it's a complex process, but it's very doable, and we have the tools to do it. Homeopathy is the tool par excellence to address chronic pain. So the summary of the key points that I'd like you to take away are on this slide. And I don't think I have to go over them again, but if you just want a quick synopsis, it's all here. And you can review the whole process quickly on this slide. That is also in the handout. And again, a quick synopsis of, you know, what the intervention is that I've been describing, is how to use homeopathic remedies to cause the epigenetic DNA changes in the DNA via the mitochondria. Okay, so we want to make epigenetic changes happen. Homeopathic remedies can do that if they talk to the mitochondria in the right way, and the mitochondria pick up the energetic homeopathic signal that speaks to them and that can help them direct their activities in the right way. So that individualized signal stimulates the natural healing potential via the mitochondria. And we usually combine that with a unique set of supports, again, as needed. You know, are they energetic supports? Are they quantum processes? Are they body-mind stress release, microbiome strengthening, organ-specific, system-specific? All of those can be worked together in a synergistic package for the individual, and perhaps at different times or different points of the healing process, depending on that individual situation. Okay, so all of this is taught seamlessly, is taught together as a whole. It's not that you learn diet here and homeopathy here and case taking there. It is one whole that's brought through 4 levels of training. And our college is offers an internationally accredited degree in homeopathy, a diploma in naturopathy, and a diploma in holistic practice, just to emphasize the fact that it really is a holistic practice that you're learning at Miche. You're finding the simulum that addresses the mitochondrial root of disease, and you're learning to do that by learning a state-of-the-art, innovative, inquiry-based case-taking method. And you learn that through one-on-one apprenticeship sessions, clinical supervision with experienced homeopaths. It's a self-paced program. There's open enrollment, so you can start anytime and go at whatever pace suits you. We have a vibrant student postgraduate community we meet with on a regular basis. Every month we have the whole community, all of our grads and the current students come together to find out what's new and exciting, what's the leading edge in research, and to have an inspiring learning experience. So if you want to know more, this last slide provides you with everything about our college, our guidebook. You can talk to an advisor. I would really suggest that you go on our website and follow us If you can sign up for our newsletter, that's what this sign up is. We have a lot of free e-training and a lot of really interesting blogs. And once a month, we send you a newsletter. And I can assure you it's not more than that. We barely get it out in time. Once a month, we send you a little newsletter to tell you what you have access to for free. We're also on Instagram. We post daily on Instagram things that are little doorways and little motivations in your life. So I hope you found this meaningful and interesting. I want to thank you with all of my heart for coming to my presentation and for sitting through the entire presentation if you made it this far. And I wish you happiness, health, and a whole, because that's what healthy is, right? A holistic lifestyle that keeps you alive for a very long time. So thank you again for coming. And of course, pain-free.
So, Judyanne, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. We really appreciate it. And I hope we get to chat again very soon.
Me too. Me too. Thank you so much for this invitation. It's lovely to see you.